All right, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Elections Weekly. As usual, I'm your host, Eric Cunningham, and with us this week we've got Joe Szymanski and Kraz Greinetz as well from our live stream last night. Both of them are on our staff team here. Dylan should also be joining us shortly, but we wanted to go ahead and get started here as we talk about some of the big political news that came out both yesterday and earlier in the week. There's been a lot of stuff that's been happening, that's been going on so far. And so we're excited to bring it to you. So we're going to go ahead and start with what happened last night. Last night's Senate primary or primaries, I should say, in Ohio and in Indiana. Those went interestingly. We'll go ahead and I guess throw it to the panel here in a second. But Mike DeWine held under 50% in the gubernatorial primary on the Republican side as an incumbent. Still managed to win fairly handily because of the split opposition, but held under 50%. J.D. Vance winning the Republican primary with about 33% of the vote. And then down ballot, Nina Turner getting utterly obliterated by Shontel Brown in the 11th district on the Democratic side. And in the 1st district of Indiana, we had the Republicans' most favored and supported nominee winning that race fairly handily. So I'll go ahead and throw it to Joe here. What did we see last night? And, as you start breaking into these, what were the kind of the things that stuck out to you?
Something that pretty quickly stuck out to me was just the way the election day vote went. That was something that was realized pretty quickly. I think that last night was going to go to J.D. Vance. That was the real key. That was a real sign when we saw the way that election day vote was going. It seemed to just from everywhere as every county and precinct started reporting more and more of their votes. Vance was getting a larger and larger lead. Certainly a sign of the effect the Trump endorsement still has. Maybe not to the effect it used to have, but certainly to the effect it still has today on a primary. Obviously, the wins that we saw from Trump-endorsed candidates, bar Max Miller in that 7th district where he was basically just handed the seat by Bob Gibbs. We saw it come close, be closer than we're used to seeing, but still a very solid victory for Vance, getting 32% out of this field. That's still an impressive margin for him, for sure. He is certainly the favorite going in against Tim Ryan. Certainly Ohio's going to be tough, especially since Mike DeWine is now renominated. That's going to be potentially, I think, a big race where it's going to be hard to potentially ticket split that much from the margins that DeWine might be able to get in his bid for re-election. But I think the election day vote was really key, and it'll be interesting to see how we see that go on as we kind of go through these primaries here in the coming next 2 months. Again, other than May 31st, like I mentioned last night, other than May 31st, there are primaries basically every Tuesday from yesterday until the end of June. So, it's going to be a lot of interesting and different dynamics that we're going to see going on here. But I think the election day vote, as we go through these primary days and primary states, really fascinating to see if we kind of see that trend continue with Trump-backed and endorsed candidates as we get through the election, as they do better on the election day vote in these key primaries.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I was surprised by the margin for J.D. Vance's victory. I thought he would win, but I thought it would be a 2, 3, 4% victory, not a 6%, 7% victory?
9%.
9%. Yeah, I didn't expect that. I think what the Trump endorsement didn't seem to move any support from candidates already in the race. It just seemed to break the undecideds. Because nobody underperformed. Even Dolan didn't underperform. Vance just overperformed. Mike DeWine also, his margin was surprising in the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. Blystone did a lot better than I think anyone was expecting, getting 12 counties by the end.
He got a large number of counties, 12. It was more than 12. Renacci only won 2 counties. Blystone got less vote, but won far more counties than Renacci did.
So I think Trump made a strategic error not endorsing there. But yeah, I do think, especially in Pennsylvania and North Carolina next week, right, Joe?
Next week is West Virginia and Nebraska next week.
Yeah, North Carolina's in 2.
May 17th is the big date. That's Idaho, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. Then there's one other state that's slipping my mind right now.
Gotcha. I think you'll see something similar in the Senate primary between Oz and McCormick. I don't expect McCormick to underperform, but with this, I do expect the undecideds to go to Oz more heavily. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is consistent with what I had read as well, which is that the election had the most undecided voters of any Senate primary in recent memory going into it. None of the major candidates were polling more than 20-25%. And that's basically what happened going into it, aside from Gibbons doing a little bit worse than he had done, early on, and then Vance obviously doing a little bit better than expected. It's worth noting, even as the early in the night, for example, Dolan was clobbering Mandel in Cuyahoga County. By the end of it, he'd only won Cuyahoga County by 8 over Vance. Probably in large part due to those, late moving election day voting, which is really, really big in Republican primaries. Far more important than early voting, to be sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, and I also wonder to what extent ideology is playing a role here, because, again, I think people who are Republican primary voters who are going to vote by mail are probably more ideologically inclined towards candidates like Dolan, versus if you're dead set on voting in person, you're probably more likely to be more conservative and listen more to Trump's endorsement. So, there's also that factor at play too.
And this is where I think maybe that's going to be the key difference between this race and Pennsylvania's. You don't really have a Matt Dolan-like candidate in Pennsylvania's Senate race. It's really kind of between Oz, McCormick, and Barnett right now, who, that's going to be an interesting factor, I think, is Barnett, who's clearly the most right-wing figure. She's tied to the hip with Doug Mastriano and Teddy Daniels in that race. But she struggled to kind of pull above 18-20% right now. You wonder if that's a ceiling for her, or if she can expand past that. But without the Trump endorsement, I think it's going to be very hard for her to expand past that, quite honestly. It'd be very hard for her to expand past that strong base of support. And also, we can't forget Pennsylvania's geographic voting factor. More so than any other country in the nation, Pennsylvania's geographic voting factor in primaries has been bar none for both Democrats and, to a slightly lesser extent, but still very much so, Republicans. We can't forget in 2018, even though Lou Barletta was by far and wide the favored and endorsed candidate in that GOP primary to go against Bob Casey, he still only won with 63% of the vote because a Western Pennsylvania state legislator decided to run against him and gained a lot of Western counties and 37% of the vote in that primary. Geographic voting is going to be a key factor in Pennsylvania. That's going to cause some key differences.
And also, for what it's worth, we talked quite a bit about Vance's appeal in rural areas, but Vance really didn't do that well in rural Ohio. Rural Ohio was Mandel territory. A lot of those counties in western Ohio, the reliably Republican ones, voted for Mandel. A lot of counties out in the east also voted for Mandel. Where Vance did really well was around Cincinnati and in suburban areas around Columbus, around Cincinnati, around the Kentucky border, and then up in the working class areas like Mahoning, areas that were more ancestrally Democratic. There's not really an analog to that in Pennsylvania, where you have a candidate who has this actual suburban, not necessarily suburban appeal, but not tanking in suburban areas. It'd be hard to imagine someone like Dr. Oz not doing well in the suburban counties in Philadelphia. It'd be pretty difficult, though, to find a Trumpy sort of candidate who is endorsed by Trump and is running on a very populist platform who could also do reasonably competent margins around Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. That would probably be fairly difficult to find, specifically the suburban areas. And Ohio has a lot more of those urban suburban Republicans than somewhere like Pennsylvania does, really.
Well, and I'm not at all surprised that Vance actually did better in those suburban counties, or more accurately, I'm not at all surprised he underperformed in the rural counties. Mandel just seems like a candidate who's more suited for that. Vance, despite his best efforts, still has that elitist image, I think. He has almost something similar to the technocrat Democrat appeal, except in a Republican analog. So I'm not at all surprised by that.
Yeah, it's just I think in the end it's not a surprising end result. I think the biggest surprise was kind of the way that the margin became. I think a lot of us thought it'd be a lot closer at the end of the night than what it actually was. But really, there's underlying stories on these House congressional primaries, though. That's for sure as well. There's been some underlying storylines there as well, especially the big shocker in the 9th district.
Yep, and we're going to go ahead and move to those real quick before we move on to some of our other news that we're going to talk about tonight. We'll talk about the big 2 primaries first. On the Democratic side, there's only one interesting primary, and I'm going to mention this first because we kind of been talking about Republicans more. This is in the 11th district. This is the district that's being currently held by Shontel Brown, who was elected in a special election several months ago to replace Marcia Fudge, I believe, who had resigned to become who had become a cabinet official in the Biden administration. Yep. This is a heavily fought primary back then. Shontel Brown managed to win by a reasonably large margin relative to expectations, about 7 points. Mm-hmm. Early on, it had been considered Nina Turner's campaign almost to lose, and then you had a lot of spending come in, and Turner simply did not respond to it. By the end of it, Brown had really established a firm image and had broken into and had used some of Turner's vulnerabilities with specific demographic groups and her specific appeal with black voters, whereas Nina Turner's appeal is more towards, more affluent liberal sort of voters around the western edge of Cleveland, which we continue to see in this race tonight. This time was a rematch between the two, and it was not nearly as anticipated. There was basically no support for Nina Turner this time from any major Democratic officials, no local support, no real federal support. She had probably
the only national endorsements she got were Bernie Sanders and AOC, I think.
Which is, you would expect that pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, she was a former Bernie surrogate, a very prominent Bernie surrogate. His endorsement isn't surprising at all.
Mm-hmm. And he's more willing to. He's not a Democrat. He's more willing to jump into more controversial races or more hopeless races, I would say.
But I think the big difference here isn't necessarily that Nina Turner didn't get the endorsements that she got last time. It's that Shontel Brown got the endorsements she had been hoping for last time. She got the Biden endorsement. She got Sherrod Brown. Those were pretty important. She didn't get them last time. And she got almost $8 million in outside spending, I think. Which Nina Turner fundraised really well last time, not nearly as well this time. Even at the height of her fundraising, last time she couldn't have outspent $8 million in outside. It just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. And because of this, this perfect storm, which compared to last time, on top of Brown being an incumbent now, the result is that Shontel Brown won by a 2-to-1 margin, 66.5% of the vote to 33.5%. This is expected. We expected a margin similar to this. We did not expect this to be close. Probably the most notable thing that came out of this was Turner afterwards being very irate about the entire situation, bringing up the previous primary, bringing up this one, saying that money had come in and defeated her, and then threatening a presidential run in 2024, among other things.
Okay. I don't want to take the victory lap because she kind of contradicted me a little bit. I said last night she was going to run for president in 2024. What I didn't say was the second half of her sentence, which was maybe as an independent.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a good idea.
Well, you don't think a third-party progressive candidate in a national election that could potentially be very close could be detrimental at all to the chance of electing a Democratic president? Is what you're suggesting?
Not just that, but I do think Nina Turner could do reasonably well in a presidential primary on the Democratic side. I don't know that she could win, but she could get some support. She's not going to get any support for an independent run.
No.
And she would, I worry that would hurt the cause of progressives more than anything.
Because it creates this bad faith image. What a lot of liberals complain about is this sort of loser image is that once you lose, when they win, when progressives win, you're expected to just kind of, that's it, move on. When liberals win, the progressives don't stop coming. It comes off as kind of a sore loser sort of situation.
Right, and that's not true. That's not true in most cases, but
sure.
Nina Turner, despite I imagine good intentions, is might make that image true.
I mean, you don't want to, we could be heading towards a timeline where Ron DeSantis is elected because Nina Turner, got 50,000 votes in Wisconsin or something stupid like that. I mean, that'd be a fun
it's still going to be Trump. Come on, Eric.
We'll see. But the other primaries we'll talk about here, we'll go through obviously the 9th district first. We'll mention some of the other ones. Particularly the 7th district, Max Miller easily won that safe Republican district, and the 13th, Madison Gilbert easily won her primary there.
I shouldn't say easily by 5 points.
Yeah, 5 points, but it's a similar. It's a fairly comfortable margin. It's not within the recall point. That's a toss-up leans sort of seat. For Republicans, it's a very narrow Biden district that's trending Republican. The sort of district you would expect Republicans to do very well in. The big one, though, is the 9th district. Republicans may have nominated a very problematic candidate, to put it lightly. This does not appear to be as bad as the Lauren Boebert and the Marjorie Taylor Greene one last time. That being said, the candidate here, J.R. Majewski, has been photographed wearing a Q T-shirt and has run on some fairly conspiratorial topics. To be fair, no Jewish space lasers yet. As far as I know, he doesn't have a history of anything like Lauren Boebert has done.
Okay, but I'm sorry, but the rap video he did is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And I resent you, Kraz, for posting that.
Yes, he posted a rap video of Let's Go Brandon.
No.
The worst thing I've ever seen.
No.
It's about as good as you would expect a white guy from Toledo
rapping about Joe Biden.
Yeah, rapping about Joe Biden. It's about as good as you would expect, which is very bad. Very bad. It's not funny. And the song isn't funny.
No, it's hilarious.
Well,
it's just not
hilariously awful.
It's not funny. It's not funny in the way he wants it to be.
Correct. It's not. It's yeah. But this is a problem. Republicans notably refused to congratulate him last night. They congratulated some of these other candidates who won, like Vance and like Gilbert, but surprisingly did not congratulate this guy. I'm confused as to why. But what do you think of this impact here? We obviously think we have this race of either a toss-up or it leans Democratic. I don't know if we're changing our rating.
Well, we're going to have to change the rating because I have it at leans Republican. It's going back to toss-up when we do our next article releases after my finals are done. So here's my statement. This is what we call a mistake. We, as much as we know that this is a Republican trending district, this is a Republican trending district. Trump won this by 3 points. Marcy Kaptur has really never run a competitive race before. But however, in Toledo and to the counties east of Toledo, Sandusky and Erie, those are parts of places where Kaptur has repeatedly overperformed, especially with right working class voters. She's probably one of the stronger candidates Republicans have tried to take out in redistricting. If we nominate a nut job, that makes our job harder.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a easy layup or anything. This is at best a mid-range 2-pointer. This is not a cinch seat. This is not like we made a seat, Trump plus 10 or 11 or anything like this. It was like Trump plus 3. So if Kaptur can, reconnect, she's one of those, in-person vocal meet the folks politicians, someone who's been vocally anti-trade her whole life. She was one of, in the NAFTA agreement, actually, one of the very vocal House Democratic votes against the agreement, and she's been very anti-trade since then. That's a message that could play very well in Toledo and in some of those counties of the east there. This race is moving back to toss-up. I think if Republicans nominated either Craig Riedel or Teresa Galvarone, it would probably stay in that leans Republican category. Mm-hmm. But Majewski, we don't know if he's a tanking candidate yet. He's a candidate that makes this one of the first races we've moved to the left so far from our in our ranking so far come the 2022 House primaries. One of the first ones we moved to the left because of because of an outside the district issue and because of a nomination. So certainly not a good nominee. Certainly not a good thing from the Republican Party.
Yeah, but I'm more bullish on him than you guys are. I mean, I think you guys are being overly negative on his chances. I mean, this is a Trump plus 4 district. I forget what the actual number is. Plus 3. The electorate could be, based on turnout differentials, we'd be looking at an electorate that's really more like Trump plus closer to 10, right? You've got people switching sides, swing voters switching sides. I'm not saying that, if he handles it poorly, I think he could go down in flames. But I mean, if he messages around this well, if he, is contrite about, being at the January 6th rally, if he's, et cetera, I just think when you're running in what is essentially a Trump plus 10 seat based on what the electorate's going to look like, I think it's fairly easy to message around these kinds of things. And basically just, kind of sweep it under the rug. So I'm actually more bullish on him than I think you guys are.
There's a slight problem here. Oh, sorry.
No, I just want to echo Kraz. Look at Ed Durr. And also, yeah, this is going to be an R plus 8 to 10 seat based on the electorate. I mean, yes, this is like nominating Lee Carter for governor of Virginia, but Lee Carter would have won in 2018. So I do think there are going to be some QAnon people in fairly swingy districts.
But see, the problem here is that it's pretty rare for someone to be photographed in a Q shirt and not have some other pretty bad stuff waiting in the background.
Okay, that's fair.
That's the concern here. Is if this is just he got photographed in a T-shirt with the letter Q on it once, and went to the January 6th rally and didn't shoot anyone or something, like yeah maybe. But if if there's some stuff that is probably found out, which if you're in this conspiracy sinkhole, there is going to be stuff, and it's going to be public stuff publicly on your Facebook page in all likelihood. If he has a competent campaign team, they are scrubbing every trace of himself from the internet right now.
Have we considered investigating that, by the way? Like, if we considered doing it, go and take a look.
That's not a bad...
Do a reprise of the Marjorie Taylor Greene piece?
Yeah.
Eric, I think you're actually right, because I think that whenever you go down this kind of rabbit hole, if you're the type of person to go down this kind of rabbit hole, I think that oftentimes you have other skeletons.
Bad.
Hurt you.
Yeah. I mean, it's really weird. It's really uncommon to just be like, hey, I'm a delusional conspiracy theorist that think there's a cult of satanic worshiping pedophiles who are drinking the blood of babies. Yeah. And that's the only crazy thing I believe in. Like, that's pretty not common.
Yeah. I think that's the concern among most Republicans. Like, what else is behind this guy?
Yeah.
What else is there? What else behind this guy? Again, captors from an older age of politics where face-to-face interaction has come. This is not like, we are running against, a modern day politician. This is an old school, someone who's been there a long time, and someone who does have a lot of name recognition among members of this district, especially to the Toledo and eastern part of this district. It's going to be really interesting to kind of see. This is going to be one that's going to be transforming. This is really kind of the bad one of the night in those House primaries. Really, none of the other ones have any issues, I think, here going on in terms of House primaries on the Republican side. This one is really the bad one, and it was a really bad one, sadly, in terms of what happened.
So, and to bolster your points, if his campaign is going to be running on it, if his campaign thinks rap videos about Biden are a good campaign strategy, yeah, you guys might be in trouble on that one.
And to be clear, this video makes the Michael Scott the Electric City rant from The Office look like a work of genuine masterpiece.
Yeah.
Oh boy,
it's really bad.
It's horrendously awful. Have you not seen it, Joe?
No, I refused to watch it last night.
Okay, good. Yeah, don't watch it.
No, Joe, save yourself. Watch it.
Save yourself. Save yourself.
Suffer. Suffer. I had to see it. Everyone else does. I literally sent it to 4 friends. Like, you have to be punished for me.
Yeah, I'm not gonna inflict this on our viewers, but if you want to watch the video, it's out there, and it's gonna be an r/cringetopia fairly soon. I'm pretty sure.
If it's not there already.
Yeah, if it's not there, I'm gonna post it to Cringetopia.
Hey. Get the clout. Get the clout.
But yes, if that's the type of campaign he's running, he's not going to win.
Yeah. But we're going to go ahead and move on to our next big topic, which is the news that had come out before the primary. A leak from the Supreme Court had shown a draft opinion from Justice Alito, which would strike down Roe v. Wade unequivocally in very aggressive, very strong language, striking down Roe v. Wade as wrong at the moment it was decided, pointing at several other decisions that have been overturned as well. Basically, a very, very long diatribe against Roe v. Wade, against its standing, against everything about it, and ultimately returning the matter to the states, to like the situation that abortion was before Roe v. Wade, where states had their own individual laws. There was no federal law on abortion. To be clear, there are federal laws on abortion right now. There's the partial birth abortion ban, which was signed into law under the Bush administration. And then there's the Hyde Amendments, which of course have been passed under spending bills. Those are the really only two that I know of federal laws regarding abortion right now. Actually, the other one would be the abortion clinic access, the Clinton legislation that set up barrier zones in terms of it, like there was a response to anti-abortion clinic violence in the 90s. That's the only other thing I can think of there. I could be wrong, but the big thing is this is pretty substantial. This is pretty substantial news. It's also really weird it came out right now. Supreme Court leaks are pretty rare. John Roberts is furious about this. He actually has not signed on to this opinion from what we can tell, but he's very furious about the leak, which is not surprising. Democrats are obviously apoplectic about the prospect of Roe being repealed. Republicans are apoplectic that this was leaked to begin with. So I'm going to go ahead and throw to Kraz, who has actually written about abortion for Elections Daily before, about the end of Roe v. Wade. Actually, I'll go ahead and find that article and link it here because it's a good article. The big complicating factor here, though, is that this is not an October surprise. This is in May. The entire cycle is basically going to be done in like a week. And then once this happens, if it does, we already had the cycle. Like, it's not going to be as big a deal a second time. That's the only complication here. I don't think this is what we expected on abortion, but I'll go ahead and link the article here in the comments and then let kind of Kraz talk about, his thoughts on this this draft, and then kind of just more of what has written about on this topic.
Yeah, so first on the draft and the leak, I mean, this is a very strongly worded draft. It was a first draft, which I think has raised some questions for me, because when I first saw the leak, I thought for sure this was a progressive or a liberal law clerk who wants to engender backlash, wants to show the justices what's going to happen when this decision comes down. But if that was the case, I mean, I don't know why you would leak a first draft, right? Presumably, if this was circulated in February, and the votes are the same, they've circulated, double-digit number of drafts. There's been huge edits to this. And so that's the only thing that makes me a little bit kind of question my intuition about where this comes from, because the fact that it's a first draft is very odd to me. And I don't know why you would leak the first draft. But suffice to say that this will, I think actually that this will be toned down to a significant extent when this decision comes down. If the votes are the same, I expect Roe v. Wade will be overturned. The next question would then be, I mean, what we wanted to address here was basically, does this have any impact electorally, and kind of like, is this how does this impact elections going forward? So I think that, the most common thing you'll see are polls that say that 70% of the country doesn't want Roe v. Wade overturned. So this will be so unpopular that it will hurt Republicans. I don't find this, and I think I wrote about this, I don't find this to be a plausible argument. I don't find those polls to be plausible personally, because I don't think that you can poll on a legal decision like this and get an accurate count of people. We read Roe v. Wade in my con law class this semester, and I think for most kids that was the first time they ever read the decision, and those are law students. So I can tell you for sure that not even 70% of the country has read the decision. And also, other polls that ask more specific questions: do you favor a ban on abortion after 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, all of which are completely inconsistent with Roe's central holding. Those usually get either, not majority support maybe, but at least solid support. So yeah, I find those polls to be not really plausible. Also, even if it was unpopular, you don't vote on justices. Justices aren't up for election on the Supreme Court like they are in some states, so it'd be hard to see how it would directly translate to the ballot box. I do think a better question, though, is, going forward, if abortion is going to be a more live issue, right, where people are actually voting on policies that have a real impact, does this have an effect on coalitions? Does it have an effect on, how different groups think about politics? So I think a couple of things here. First is that to the extent I think it has an impact, I think it has an impact on the margins in terms of accelerating the trends we've already seen. When you look at abortion referenda in states that have had referenda on restrictive measures, so 6-week bans, bans starting at conception, 6-week bans, 10-week bans, 22-week bans, whatever. What you tend to see is that those bans do worse than Republicans in suburban areas, and they do better in rural areas, especially rural, heavily non-white areas. And so I think that will probably accelerate the trends we've already been seeing. Sometimes the differences are quite dramatic too. But more broadly, I think there's been some talk about, will this engender backlash because Republicans will overreach on the issue? I do think that there is some solid evidence from various referenda on total bans, especially total bans that have no exceptions, that total bans beginning at conception or virtually total bans tend to be not that popular. Or at least I think I would say on balance, they might be, or probably, less popular than the GOP as a whole. That being said, though, I'm not sure that unpopularity would directly translate into a lack of GOP success at the ballot box. And to the extent it would, abortion is the kind of issue where it'd be really easy to get ballot measures on the ballot in most states. And so I think that if voters were dissatisfied, you start to see states move through ballot measure to kind of a middle ground that they wanted, which is kind of what's happened in Europe, where every country's kind of moved to wherever it thinks is morally okay. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see something similar in various states. So I'll kick it back to you guys for anything you want to talk about. That was the general overview.
No, that makes sense. And
I think, sorry, Eric, but I think Kraz made a very good point about, I think, the energy aspect behind Democrats in this overturning. And I think I want to point to a statistic that I saw online today that I think really kind of disproves the point that this is going to be the massive energy turner that it is for Democrats. In the first 23 hours on Act Blue, the Democratic donation, software and, the big, where a lot of people send their money to Democratic candidates, after the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg back in October of 2020, in the first 24 hours after her passing, Democrats on Act Blue raised over $30 million in donations in those first 23 hours. So after the news about Roe v. Wade in the first 23 hours, they only raised $9 million on Act Blue. So I think what this changes, especially if this is the final decision, I agree with Kraz that I think we're going to see definitely a changed one, especially since Robert just said this is the first draft. In comments, he also said this is not the final draft. The final draft has been changed. Definitely from, I think, some of the stances I even think Alito wrote about. I would not be surprised if some of those positions have been changed or written out in the final decision. I would not be surprised, especially since it sounds like Roberts himself, while he didn't want to overturn Roe v. Wade, seemingly signaled support for the 15-week abortion ban that is being discussed. That is the basis of this argument right now at the Supreme Court. I think things will be changed around. And, I think this could have a bigger effect in state legislative elections, especially if this issue does come back to the states. I question how much it's going to be happening in the federal election. And we can't forget that for a lot of people still, the biggest issue has been the economy. We continue to deal with big inflation. We continue to deal with issues with gas prices, which have started to go back up again. The gas station right next to my apartment building in Virginia, here at school, in the last 2 weeks, gas prices have gone from around $4.20 back up to $4.50 again, a rise of almost 30 cents in the last 2 weeks. There's been rumors of a recession potentially coming to hit around the summer months or the early fall months. That will be a bigger problem, I think, to the minds of a lot of American voters if that does come about. I think this will certainly energize the base, a certain sect of Democratic base voters. I think educated white women especially are going to be energized by this issue. I just question whether or not that's in a midterm, especially if that's going to be a big enough base in a lot of key states and key areas, if that's a big enough voter demographic for that to have really massive effects on key races going into the 2022 midterms.
So I actually would go a step further than Kraz. Not only do I not think it'll help, I think it would actually depress Democratic turnout to a degree. Democrats feel kind of defeated almost. Like when people tell them, oh, just vote for Democrats if you want to fix this, the replies aren't, yeah, let's go do that. It's, we did vote for you. Those are the replies right now. And I understand that. I mean, this is a big issue. This was an issue that Democrats fought on for my entire political awareness. And they lost. I mean, this is the first rollback on women's rights that I can think of in my lifetime. So I mean, yes, I do think it'll help Democrats in some areas. I think Maggie Hassan is going to be doing a bit better in New Hampshire than she otherwise would have. Janet Mills in Maine, I think, is going to not be safe, but I think she's breathing a little easier against LePage right now. I could see Cortez Masto in Nevada doing a bit better because of the massive advantage for pro-choice voters there.
Yeah. What I would say is I'm going to do a little bit of a counterintuitive argument here, which is that I don't actually think this is going to have a huge impact on either party in one way or the other, because I think the impact of abortion as a political issue has been overstated, generally speaking. There have been pro-life Republicans elected to the presidency. There have been pro-choice Democrats elected to the presidency with all range of views in between. In doing so, Republicans have won states like New Hampshire, like New Mexico, like Nevada, that are strongly or Alaska that are more pro-choice. Democrats have won states like New Mexico, North Carolina, Georgia, that have a lot of pro-life voters. The most salience you see on this issue is that if you're running in a really, really blue district and you're a Republican, you're probably going to be pro-choice. If you're running in a really, really red state and you're a Democrat, you're probably going to be pro-life, although not always. There's actually, among the Democratic governors in blue states right now, or red states, Laura Kelly in Kansas is very strongly pro-choice. Only John Bel Edwards is pro-life. Even in West Virginia, you've had Democratic governors that veto abortion restrictions. I don't think voters care about this too much. I think what they care about is when it gets to extremes. So if you have someone going out and promoting this the very clear line voters have shown is anything bordering on rape is a complete and total no-go. It's such a disastrous no-go that you can lose Republican 10 to 20 districts by stepping in this mud hole. You can be utterly and completely obliterated. We saw that last night. And every single Republican I know is not unhappy that this guy lost. That had said that women who are being raped should just enjoy it. Trying to that's the sort of stuff voters like no. And not only a no, it's an emphatic no, and it's a strong no. That's the sort of stuff that will change voters. On the Democratic side, really, taxpayer funding is maybe the one line where voters are willing to vote more against Democrats. I mean, that's a salient issue for Republicans. So, but really, I mean, on the paper, most of these specific issues, even in Colorado, you had 2014, Cory Gardner had a mixed record on contraception. On abortion, he supported a heartbeat. I mean, he supported a lot of things that Colorado voters emphatically do not support. And even then, a Democratic incumbent, Mark Udall, running a strongly and almost exclusively pro-abortion campaign, lost. That's also pretty telling. That even in that sort, you had a literal Republican who would distance himself from, but had a genuine track record on this, but it wasn't an extreme track record. He wasn't going out and saying things that are nonsense. He still won. So the long and short of that rambling, I guess, is that I don't really think this matters too much, aside from the fact that now you're going to have to pay more attention to these extremes, and it'll be debated in the policy realm instead of being debated as a vague, oh, well, this will never happen because, we can't pass the heartbeat bill because, Roe v. Wade is law, or, we can't legalize, partial birth abortions because of federal law. Like if Democrats have the opportunity to repeal that law, they absolutely will.
So
I don't know. I think it's I just think this is an overblown as a political issue, and that's what this is going to reveal.
So correct me if I'm wrong. I did read that immediately after Roe v. Wade, after the decision was leaked, James Lankford and Joni Ernst had a meeting about, I think, a 6-week abortion ban federally. If Republicans were to run on that, like you said, I think that's a losing strategy.
That would be unpopular.
Yeah, I think that's a losing strategy. Otherwise, I don't totally disagree with what you're saying. I don't think it'll have a massive political impact. Maybe it should, but it probably won't. But if Republicans decide to run on a 6-week abortion ban and raising taxes on the middle class like Rick Scott wants, that's a bad platform.
That would be a negative outcome.
Yeah. And to be fair, I think, Democrats, they could have some vulnerability specifically with Catholic voters and Hispanics. For a long time, an abortion ban has generally not been on the table for a lot of Catholic voters who might otherwise be inclined to support abortion restrictions and who are kind of able to vote for Democrats because they're, with the frame of mind, we can't do anything about this. You might as well vote for, we agree with Democrats more on some things. If Democrats become the party that's not just, keep Roe v. Wade, but it's the party of, as the policy platform of what we're going to do when we're in charge at the federal level is unlimited taxpayer-funded abortion on demand through all 3 stages of pregnancy, with Catholic hospitals being required to perform abortions, that's going to be a losing issue in a lot of areas as well. That's the other extreme.
Oh, I was about to say that that this would accelerate, I think, the losses of the Rio Grande Valley.
This would hurt Rio Grande Valley. It would hurt in New Mexico probably. Certainly would not help in a lot of the South among Black voters, where abortion is not a mobilizing issue. It's by any means, but it's certainly not extremely popular. You have a lot more, conservative leaning Black voters who are not more moderate socially.
See, I think this helps take out whoever the nominee is in Texas's 28th. Though I do think this does help Cisneros in the primary. I also expect this to help Warnock a little bit, especially if it accelerates the trend towards Democrats in the suburbs. I think this will help Warnock hold on.
Yeah, what ultimately, though, I will say is just on a politically neutral level, I don't think returning this issue to the political, returning this issue politically to the body politic is going to be bad for things. I think if it actually may result in a more longer lasting consensus nationally than Roe v. Wade when this actually passed into law. Because if there's actual policy consequences for holding extreme views on this issue, voters may have to reconsider how they vote. I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. We've kind of been stuck in this situation where Roe has been the law of the land. That's just how it is.
Yeah,
you can't really do anything about it. So we're just debating hypotheticals.
Sure, but that political consensus is being traded for a lot of things that are generally pretty good. I mean, the states that abortions are going to be banned in, the people there who support abortions won't care about the political consensus.
Yeah, no, but there's certainly if you're more on the line of a pro-choice, then that's disastrous. Just me looking at this as someone who's moderately pro-life, who really only cares about it, to the point of viability. At which point, I generally don't have a huge preference. I mean, I certainly don't oppose further restrictions, but viability is the point I care about, and doing that. It just someone like me, I don't necessarily this is bad if that's where it sort of pushes it to, but it could just lead to the opposite outcome. I know Kraz, I'll throw it to Kraz because I know exactly what he's going to say here as to what this could ultimately lead to, and to the sort of disastrous consequences if you have states competing with each other over, sanctioning each other over abortion laws or prosecuting people in other states, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that I think that, I think so I think that there's a universe in which you see kind of a long-term political consensus, either at the federal level. I do think if Democrats or anyone were to codify some type of abortion system at the federal level, I think it would be kind of hard to roll that back.
It would be struck down.
I don't know. I mean, I read the partial birth abortion ban act is still law. I tend to think that you could codify or ban abortion at the federal level. My con law professor disagreed with me, but I think you can. But if you did, I think it'd be kind of hard to roll that stuff back politically speaking. I think there's a lot of status quo bias with that kind of stuff. But I do think, though, that this might change a little bit less than we think, because I think that the fight still might be in the courts. Not necessarily in legislatures. Yes, you're going to have big fights in legislatures. You're going to have people voting on ballot measures. But just being honest, I mean, look, you're going to have states competing. You're going to have California saying they're going to fund out-of-state abortions. That's going to lead to states like Texas, states like Missouri trying to clamp down, trying to prosecute abortions that happen outside of states. That's going to raise really novel legal issues. This is not a settled legal issue about whether or not states can prosecute behavior that happens outside their borders. And so, that's going to be, a serious legal issue that's going to get fought over in the courts. Then you're going to have, you're going to have progressives who, day one, it's going to be, how do we get Roe back, right? You gotta build grassroots. You got to get back into court. You got to get Roe back. And for pro-life people, I think that, I think the claim is, we want this to be kicked back to the states. It's a profound moral issue. That's all true. But if they start losing at the ballot box, the inevitable temptation is going to be to go to the courts and say, actually, the 14th Amendment bans abortion. This is a theory that I don't think is subscribed to by many legal scholars, but, it's not an implausible theory if you're not, an originalist. And so I think that there is a temptation then to go back and say that for both sides. So I think that, it's going to be a massive fight. I think it'll accelerate the trends we've been seeing kind of at the margins. But I'm not sure it's going to be an electoral game changer in the long run.
No, I doubt it'll be an electoral game changer by any stretch.
It's regardless. We'll see ultimately what happens here. It's going to be interesting to see, assuming this holds. This very well, draft opinions have changed as to this could very well change to what we thought would probably happen, which would be more of a 15-week ban or a viability, upholding what Roberts would seem to want, which would draw off of Roe rather than straight overturning it. But that's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate your support, whether you're listening to us on our podcast platforms, watching us on Twitter, watching us on YouTube. Be sure to like and follow us wherever you're doing so. You can find us at elections-daily.com. Normally, I would have everyone just read off their names, but I think we've got a lot of people here, so probably not too viable to do right now. All I'll say is you can see our names on here. If not, you can find us on Twitter fairly easily. Our names are all pretty visible. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you back here next week or not next week. We'll see you next Thursday because it's a special Wednesday episode for the primary election result outcome. But we'll see you next week, same time, just on a different day. Thanks.